Welcome to Tibet This Week, where we bring you a weekly news edition on His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Tibet, and the Central Tibetan Administration. These are the headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama attends long life prayer. His Holiness the Dalai Lama joins recitation of Mani Mantra at Tsuglagkhang. Global leaders from 29 countries adopted 3 key resolutions in the 9th World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet in Tokyo. Central Tibetan Administration's leadership engages with Tibetans and Tibetan supporters in Japan ahead of World Parliamentarians Conference on Tibet. Kalon Gyari attends the opening ceremony of the 30th Gyalyum Chenmo Memorial Gold Cup as chief guest. Office of Tibet Australia joins global commemoration of Tiananmen Massacre and Hong Kong Democratic Movement. Representative Tsering Yangkey attends cross-party group for Tibet in the Scottish Parliament. Office of Tibet Brussels promotes Central Tibetan Administration's Blue Book project in Belgium's Multicultural Festival. Last Sunday, His Holiness the Dalai Lama joined Thamdo Rinpoche, the abbot of Namgyal Monastery, and an estimation of 4,000 people in reciting the mantra of Avalokiteshvara, following a ritual known in Tibetan as Mani Thungdrup. The congregation has been collecting money since the day 1 of Sagatawa, the month that commemorates birth, enlightenment, and the passing away of the Buddha. Before leaving the temple, His Holiness stood up to pay homage to Wati Sangpo statue and the image of the Buddha. On Wednesday this week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama attended the long life prayer offered by ex-students of CST Darjeeling, the Tibetan community of New York and New Jersey, and the Tibetan American Foundation of Minnesota. At the gathering of around 5,500 people, His Holiness recounted one of his dreams of the Buddha, where Buddha patted his head with kindness, a gesture expressed as approval of everything His Holiness has done in his lifetime. His Holiness further expressed that although him and the followers of Buddha Shakyamuni are living at a time where the teachings seem to be in decline, but one can revive it within themselves. Global leaders from 29 countries participated in the 9th World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet in Tokyo, Japan for 3 days starting this Monday. The convention was organized by Tibetan Parliament in Exile in collaboration with the Japanese Parliamentary Support Group for Tibet with 142 participants. The convention culminated in the adoption of 3 key resolutions: the Tokyo Declaration, the Tokyo Action Plan, and a resolution celebrating the legacy of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama on his 90th birthday. The resolution recognizes Tibet as historically an independent nation prior to China's forceful invasion since 1950, urged the People's Republic of China to re-engage in substantive dialogue to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict with representatives of His Holiness the Dalai Lama or democratically elected leaders without preconditions and through middle way approach, calls for the release of the 11th Panchen Lama and all Tibetan political prisoners, rejects China's efforts to rename Tibet as Xizang, commits to raise awareness on Tibet's environment and collaborate initiatives on Tibet.
We support Tibet's historical status and right to self-determination. We reject the efforts to rename Tibet as Xizang by the PRC.
The members of the 9th WPCT celebrates His Holiness the Dalai Lama's life and work by committing to support His Holiness's 4 principal commitments, reaffirms that the sole authority over the reincarnation of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama lies in the hands of His Holiness himself and the Gandhian Potang Trust, joins the Central Tibetan Administration in the global 90th birthday celebration of His Holiness. Action plans on Tibet were broadly classified into 3 categories as parliamentary actions on Tibet, governmental level action on Tibet, and UNO level action on Tibet. The convention this time largely focused on countering China's disinformation, addressing challenges posed by authoritarianism, and promoting international diplomatic efforts to resolve repression and human rights violations, understanding Tibet's environmental significance and the impact of China's repressive policies on Tibet's environment, and building global solidarity for Tibet to counter China's influence and advancing legislative efforts. The Central Tibetan Administration leadership included Speaker Kimbusnam Tempe, Sikyong Pemba Tsering, Deputy Speaker Dolma Tekhang, Kalon Nonzin Dolma of the Department of Information and International Relations, members of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile, and officials from CTA including the Secretary and Additional Secretary of DIIR. Representatives of His Holiness the Dalai Lama were also in attendance. The opening ceremony featured addresses by Chief Guest Akiko Santo, member and former Speaker of the House of Councillors, Special Guest Aki Ebbi, former First Lady of Japan, and Reverend Chojun Otani, the 25th Chief Abbot of the Higashi Hongwanji Temple. A special highlight of the session was the message from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Video messages from Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi and Congressman Michael McCall were also presented. With the welcome and introductory remarks by Speaker Khenpo Tempe of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile, the speakers for the 3 days comprised of Sikyong Pembasring of CTA, members of parliaments, diplomats, and experts from around the world. Ahead of the 9th WPCT, the Central Tibetan Administration's leadership engaged with Tibetans and Tibetan supporters in Japan. This Monday, Sikyong Pembasring met with Dr. Kazuko Tatsumura Hillier, a devoted friend of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and a lifelong supporter of Tibet. Dr. Hillier introduced the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts to the Western world and continues to support Manjushri Orphanage Home in Arunachal Pradesh, amongst other contributions for Tibet. Sikyong also visited Seifu Gagwin School in Osaka, hosted by Vice Principal Hiroki Hiraoka, and in a separate meeting, he addressed a group of Japanese intellectuals and council members associated with the Tibet support group Fire Under Snow at the Avina Hotel. The CDA leadership, including Speaker Khenpo Tempe, Sikyong Pembasring, Deputy Speaker Dolma Tsering, and Parliamentarian Tenzin Pinzo, addressed a group of Tibetan community in Japan at the Office of Tibet. In attendance were Representative Dr. Tsawang Gyabo Arya, former Representative Pema Gyabo, Tinchoy Gyatso, President of the International Campaigns for Tibet, as well as staffs from the Office of Tibet. In their address at the gathering, the CDA leadership stressed on the importance of studying and understanding Tibet's historical context, prioritizing the preservation and transmission of Tibetan language and culture to one's children, lobbying and advocating for Tibet in their host countries, underscored the importance of international support groups for Tibet, and encouraged unity amongst Tibetans in Japan. In Moroyama town, Saitama Prefecture, Sikyong also interacted with a group of first generation of Tibetans who began settling in Japan in the early 1960s. Last Sunday, Kalon Gyari of the Department of Security, Central Tibetan Administration, attended the opening ceremony of the 30th Gyalyum Chenmo Memorial Gold Cup as its chief guest at Upper District School, Dharamsala. Yishu Wangmo, Chief Justice Commissioner of the Tibetan Supreme Justice Commission, attended as a special guest. 16 teams from India and Nepal are participating in this year's GCM tournament, which is scheduled to run till 11th of this month. Players and organizing committee of this tournament received an audience with His Holiness the Dalai Lama this Thursday. Last Sunday, Tawa Sangmo, the Chinese liaison officer of the Office of Tibet, Australia, attended a seminar hosted by the Australia-New Zealand Alliance of Victims of the Chinese Communist Regime at Ashfield Uniting Church in Sydney. The event honoured the lives lost in the Tiananmen Square Massacre and the Hong Kong Democratic Movement. She recalled a powerful anecdote when His Holiness the Dalai Lama was one of the first world leaders to issue a statement in support of the Chinese student movement in 1989, despite knowing the risk of that jeopardizing his possible informal meeting with Chinese counterpart in Hong Kong. Continuing this show of solidarity, Tawa Sangmo, along with the Chinese liaison officers of the other offices of Tibet in North America and Europe, joined a global virtual commemoration co-organized by Chinese Democrats in Europe. Tawa Sangmo also attended the voluntary blood donation camp that the Tibetan community in Canberra organized, honoring His Holiness the Dalai Lama's upcoming 90th birthday. Last Wednesday, Representative Tsering Yangkey of the Office of Tibet, London, attended the cross-party group for Tibet at Holyrood, the Scottish Parliament. The meeting was chaired by Ross John Greer, member of the Scottish Parliament and the chair of the Scottish Cross-Party Group for Tibet. At the meeting, Representative Tsering Yangkey thanked Ross John Greer for raising concerns about His Holiness the Dalai Lama's reincarnation at the Scottish Parliament session and informed them about the confirmed programs to celebrate His Holiness's birthday in London. Tsering Yangkey also met former member of the Scottish Parliament, Linda Fabiani, during their visit to the National Museum of Scotland. As a token of gratitude for Linda's stewardship of the Tibet group, Representative Tsering Yangkey offered a scarf and His Holiness the Dalai Lama's latest book, Voice for the Voiceless. Ross John Greer, Representative Tsering Yangkey, along with Tibet Solidarity Board members Cameron Garrett and Ileana Brian Rosengren, also visited Kagyu Sameling Monastery and met with Yishe Lose Rinpoche, abbot of the monastery, last Friday. Tenzin Norden represented the Office of Tibet Brussels at the Multicultural Festival last Friday in Belgium on the invitation of Lungta, Tibet Support Group in Belgium. As a part of the celebration, Office of Tibet Brussels, with the help of Lungta and VTAG Belgium, promoted the Blue Book project of the Central Tibetan Administration and raised awareness about the Tibetan cause. That is all for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. See you next week.